So this gained $340 million rewrite history.
Most people don't know the real story of Alfred Nobel. One morning in 1888, Alfred Nobel sat down to read the newspaper in his conservatory. He scanned the pages casually, but then he froze. The merchant of death is dead. Dr. Alfred Nobel, who became rich by finding ways to kill more people faster than ever before, died yesterday. It was his own obituary. The newspaper had made a mistake. Alfred's older brother Ludwig had died in
What?
France, and the journalist had confused the two.
The newsman report?
But in that moment, he saw exactly how the world would remember him. Not as an inventor, but as a butcher. Now, the wording in the obituary, the merchant of death and all that, well, it's likely been exaggerated over the years. We could only find an obituary that described him as a man who can hardly be passed off as a benefactor of humanity. But reading this allowed Alfred to see what others truly
He invented dynamite or something, that's why.
It wasn't good. He had earned his reputation building an empire on one substance, nitroglycerin. It's one of the most powerful explosives in the world. Its blast pressure is over 100 times greater than gunpowder. Oh my god. Oh, that's so sick! But that power comes at a price. Nitroglycerin is so sensitive that if it's dropped, shaken, or even just bumped, it can detonate. And as a result, hundreds of workers died trying to handle it. So Alfred made it his mission to tame this beast. But in doing so, he created powerful new explosives.
This could be good for the mine.
Used in everything from blasting tunnels to making bombs. Tools that transformed the modern world, but also contributed to deaths of tens of thousands of people, unleashing a level of destruction that would come to define him. Alfred's father, Emmanuel, was also an inventor. He opened the first ever rubber factory in Sweden and invented the rotary lathe, which made modern plywood possible. But Emmanuel struggled with business. He went bankrupt shortly after Alfred was born. So Emmanuel set off to Russia to start over, leaving his family behind. Some of Alfred's earliest memories were of watching his brothers sell matches on the street corners of Stockholm just to afford food. He was often sick, bedridden with colds, stomach problems, and bouts of depression. He would later say, "Mine was a pitiful half-life which ought to have been extinguished by some compassionate doctor as I yelled my way into the world." But soon after Alfred turned 9, a letter arrived from his father asking the family to join him in St. Petersburg. See, in the early 1850s, the great powers of Europe were gearing up for war, and Emmanuel spotted an opportunity. He realized Russia's capital was vulnerable to attack from the sea, so he approached Tsar Nicholas I with plans for a new kind of explosive device, one that would float in the harbor and detonate on contact with enemy ships, a sea mine. Within months of his proposal, in the Black Sea just off Sinop, the Russian Navy sank an Ottoman fleet, and the Crimean War began. Emmanuel's invention was suddenly in high demand, and the newly established Nobel armaments factory quickly grew from a few dozen employees to over 1,000, producing mines, torpedoes, and other explosives for the Russian military. With money now pouring in, Emmanuel decided to invest in Alfred's education. At the age of 17,
how does the explosives inside the water works?
Alfred found himself in a lab in Paris studying under the world's greatest chemists, and it's here that he met an Italian doctor named Ascanio Sobrero, who had a peculiar demonstration. Sobrero would take an ordinary-looking piece of cotton and lay it on an anvil. He would raise his hammer and... It's like a bird ran into a window. Right? Yeah, that was a good one, right? Yeah, that was a great one. Soaked into that cotton with a new explosive material, nitroglycerin, and it was unlike anything the world had ever seen before. See, until then, the most commonly used explosive was gunpowder, but it had a major drawback. It's fast, but it's not that fast. When we were doing it, it was much slower than the speed of sound. Jesus! That's because all the ingredients you need, the carbon for fuel, the potassium nitrate for oxygen, and the sulfur to speed up the reaction, they are all in separate grains, and if they're spread far apart, the reaction is just too slow. Come on, you can do it! Go! But if you contain gunpowder, that forces these reactants closer together, and it also traps in heat, which accelerates the reaction. And this allows the pressure from the hot gases to build up until...
a grenade? Why the name?
Of different diameter holes and a film inside.
The larger circles have more area, and so under the same pressure, they will experience more force, and so burst first. The smaller circles take more pressure to break because they've got smaller area.
The smaller the circle that gets punctured means the higher the blast over pressure.
Get black powder into clay.
Fire in the hole! 3, 2, 1. Yeah.
That's it?
It launched the block a bit, popped the top right off.
Let's look at the bikini gauge, which looks totally
intact. Totally intact.
Yeah. I'm getting nothing, yeah. All right,
so we'll leave that for the nitro. When the nitroglycerin goes off, it's going to be like someone shooting 50 cal. So I don't know if you've been to the range, but that's going to be a big blast.
So it's going to be more powerful this time.
Fire in the hole! 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh my god. So first thing I noticed is there are bits of clay that just rain down on me. I got bits of blue all over me. That's crazy. Right there. Is there anything left?
Yeah, there's a bunch of clay. On this window, on that window, on this window, on the bikini gauge. It's like a Jackson Pollock paper.
There's no way we're gonna frame that.
You can put like needles in there.
There's instant
Maybe much more purple.
Yeah. When it's fast on the Phantom, then it's fast.
Nitroglycerin is incredibly powerful, and it gets this power from its molecular structure. See, nitroglycerin is a highly unstable molecule. It consists of a chain of 3 carbon atoms with 3 oxygens, and then 3 nitro groups attached to those, which are just nitrogen atoms bonded to 2 oxygen atoms. These nitro groups are what makes nitroglycerin so unstable. Oxygen is more electronegative than nitrogen, so these 2 oxygen atoms pull on the electrons from the nitrogen, which shifts the electron density away from this 3rd oxygen. But now there's a little shared electron density between these 2 atoms, which results in a much weaker bond between the nitro groups and the main chain. So you get these weak spots, and all it takes is a little bit of energy, like from the shock created by hammer strike, and then those bonds snap apart. So now you've got all these atoms that are swapping partners, and they form much more stable products, like nitrogen gas, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. And this process releases a huge amount of energy and heat.
Can they put fluorine in there?
Far from fearing its power, he believed he'd be the one to unlock it and solve one of nitroglycerin's greatest problems. If I had a jar sitting ready and I wanted to detonate it, how do I do that? Need a long fuse. But what's crazy about nitroglycerin is that a regular flame won't cause it to ignite. So if I ran a fuse into that vial, it's not going to explode. See, while a fuse can heat nitroglycerin, which makes its molecules vibrate faster, and it might even break a few NO bonds, it usually doesn't break enough of them at the same time to detonate the rest of the liquid. So it doesn't explode. However, if you drop it... But even that effect isn't consistent. We tried putting a vial loose in the back of this RC truck, expecting the bumpy ride to trigger it.
Why is it not consistent?
And nothing. It always seems to be blowing up when you don't want it to, and you can't really get it to blow up when you want it to. That's very paradoxical. You know, my browser used to look like flashlights.
Okay, that's just
Too. I had
one
Windows and tabs
set.
scattered like debris. I had YouTube, Wikipedia, random research articles, some things that I swear I never opened. But that changed when I switched to today's video sponsor, Opera. With listening to some music in the background, some explosions. In 1852, when Alfred returned to Russia, he moved into a cramped apartment with his brother Robert, and he turned their kitchen into a makeshift lab. He was searching for a reliable way to detonate nitroglycerin, dreaming it could one day power his father's sea mines. But when the Crimean War ended in 1856, the Russian government refused to honor the contracts they'd signed during the war. So the Nobel factory was forced to shut down, and Emmanuel went bankrupt for the second time. Alfred later wrote that his father was, quote, a man of genius, but a failure all the same. And so Alfred goes back to Sweden, and he decides, he's like, I'm not going to make the mistakes of my father. Where does his mind go? Sitting with nitroglycerin. He's like, if I can make this, I'll be successful on my own terms. By the summer of 1862, a 28-year-old Alfred thought he was onto something. Excited, he gathered his brothers by the banks of Lake Mälaren, just behind his workshop in Stockholm, and he pulled out a metal tube with a fuse extending from the top. He ignited it and tossed it into the water. That's crazy. He had finally found a way to reliably detonate nitroglycerin. In its finished form, it worked something like this. Alfred took a container of nitroglycerin and inserted a wooden plug and packed it with gunpowder. Then when the fuse was lit, the gunpowder inside would explode, blasting down into the container. It was that sudden impact that delivered the shock needed to detonate the nitroglycerin. It was just like the hammer striking the anvil.
Seems simple enough.
We need a blasting cap for this.
Alright, so now Jesse's gonna add a blasting cap, Alfred Nobel's first major invention. My heart is just racing more than usual. I know that it's safe, but yeah, I didn't really expect to feel this nervous about it.
Fire in the hole! Fire in the hole! Fire in the hole! 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh my god.
Stay down.
Oh yeah, okay. Gotta sit down, gotta clear range.
All clear.
Oh my god.
All right, Henry.
Yeah,
How do you like that?
man.
Is that what you came for?
Yeah, for sure. That was insane.
Look at how it carved out the exact imprint of the bottle, a foot and a half below. Okay, look, we even have puncture on the second to last hole. The smallest is not punctured.
Yeah, wow.
So, that's the entire range of our measurement capability. That's awesome.
His invention, the blasting cap, was refined to use an even more consistent explosive than gunpowder, mercury fulminate. It became the first reliable way to detonate nitroglycerin on command. The design was so effective it remained
Baking bad.
unchanged for decades. I think it'd be hard to argue that this advancement doesn't find its place in every other explosive device that comes after it, basically.
Probably the most significant development since the invention of gunpowder.
The same idea, using a small explosion to trigger a much larger one, would later be used in atomic bombs to set off nuclear chain reactions. With the invention of the blasting cap, the use of nitroglycerin finally became practical.
It can break rock and make tunnels much more effectively.
Nitroglycerin sped up industrial excavation dramatically. In one mine, the rate of tunneling almost doubled, from 0.76 to 1.34 meters per day. And in Mexico, crews reported that 15 men using nitroglycerin could do the work of 25 with gunpowder. So orders started pouring in from mining companies, engineers, and railway builders from around the world. To meet the sudden demand, Alfred began producing nitroglycerin in Sweden, enlisting the help of his younger brother Emil. But on the 3rd of September 1864, an intern asked Emil for help moving a heavy crate. The two began to lift, when suddenly, the factory was ripped apart. A witness wrote this of the explosion. Most ghastly was the sight of the mutilated corpses strewn on the ground. Not only had their clothes been torn off, but on some, the head was missing and the flesh ripped off the bones. These formless masses of flesh and bone bore little or no resemblance to a human body. Emil, just 21 years old, and 4 others, the intern, a janitor, a young laborer, and a passing carpenter, all died in the explosion. Alfred blamed himself, and he swore, I will never let this happen again. I will make nitroglycerin safe. The city of Stockholm declared nitroglycerin too dangerous.
How is it going
And
to be
banned its production
said?
within city limits.
Here is explosives.
Alfred, however, refused to give up. So this is a moment where he's actually a pretty savvy entrepreneur. He says, okay, I'm not gonna do it on land, I'm gonna do it on the water. So he set up a laboratory on a floating barge on Lake Mälaren. But as he was experimenting, another one of his factories in Germany exploded. Alfred was fighting a ticking clock. With every day that passed, more lives were lost. Workers were terrified. No sane agent would use it, a mining publication reported. We confidently expect within 30 days to announce another serious accident. See, he had addressed the problem of detonation, but not nitroglycerin's fundamental sensitivity. Because nitroglycerin is so viscous, tiny bubbles of air and water vapor easily get trapped inside. As we zoom in, you'll notice there are even more. These gases are a problem. When a shockwave reaches a bubble, it squeezes it, compressing the gas and heating it up. And it happens so fast that the heat can't escape, and so the temperature inside can increase by thousands of degrees Celsius in an instant. It creates a hotspot. The gas molecules in these hotspots carry so much energy that they break the weak NO bonds in the nitroglycerin molecules nearby, and so these molecules then decompose, releasing even more hot gases. But nitroglycerin doesn't just have one of these bubbles. No, it's filled with them. So that's what makes it so sensitive to shock. A single impact can collapse many bubbles at once, which releases enough energy to trigger the chain reaction that detonates the entire liquid. That set off the nitroglycerin, drop. It didn't go. No. So this new material won't explode when you drop it. So can you still detonate it? Well, if you combine it with Alfred's other invention, the blasting cap, the resulting shockwave is powerful enough to compress many pockets of nitroglycerin at the same time, which triggers the detonation.
So they're trying to detonate on demand.
The biggest explosion we've seen up to now is 100 grams of nitroglycerin.
Yeah, that'll be the biggest one we've done so far. 3, 2, 1.
Oh, that's so sick.
To all whom it may concern, be it known that I, Alfred Nobel, have invented a new and useful composition of matter, to wit, an explosive powder. To name it, he took the Greek word dynamis, meaning power, and he made it dynamite. Alfred was determined to capitalize on his new invention, and he believed that he could make the most money in England. England is a jewel worth the rest of the world, he said. The dynamite company there would have the entire empire as its market. So in the spring of 1868, he set foot on British soil.
It's a wartime, so
Dynamite exploded on the river Thames, killing 3 people and damaging buildings 800 meters away. Investigators traced the cause to dynamite that had been sweating beads of nitroglycerin. See, wet kieselguhr from the riverbed has to first be dried to remove moisture, and that leaves empty pores ready to absorb nitroglycerin. But the Kieselguhr never loses that strong attraction to water. So if your dynamite is later exposed to moisture, even just humidity in the air, well, water seeps back into those pores. And the invading water molecules then encounter nitroglycerin, which gets pushed outwards. Now, moisture wasn't the only culprit. Time and temperature could also cause this separation, but moisture just made the problem a lot worse, though it actually wasn't Alfred's only concern. Cellulose is made by taking cellulose polymers, say
Where's the magician secret?
cotton or wood pulp, and then replacing the OH groups with oxygen atoms bonded to nitro groups, which are the same unstable groups that made nitroglycerin so explosive. So now when you ignite it, these groups rapidly break down into products like nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and water, all of which are gases, so there's no particulate to scatter light. That's why the whole thing seems to just disappear into thin air. But what Alfred was interested in was what happened when you combined it with nitroglycerin. See, nitrocellulose has these chains that are very similar to nitroglycerin chemically because of the nitro groups. So because of that, they mix easily.
Now you have two things that are soluble. They like each other. This is very different from, Kieselguhr water and nitroglycerin.
And now when you mix them, the smaller nitroglycerin molecules slip between these long nitrocellulose chains, trapping the nitroglycerin molecules and keeping them apart, just like in the dynamite. If you mix in just a small amount of nitrocellulose, you get a stable, moldable gel that resists sweating. We take a little bit of the nitrocellulose, like gun cotton, like this much. Yeah. Okay, we'll start a little bit. Right, drop it in there.
You see that soaks right in.
Yeah. Keep on adding bits until
Until it soaks all up, and then we'll stir around to make sure there's no dry spots.
But that's not all. This mixture also solves Alfred's problem of yield. The matrix, like the structure that's being held in, is itself explosive. So now you get perfect yield, no sweating, bing bang boom. And because the material is a gel, it can be molded into different shapes, perfect for precise controlled mining blasts.
While it's soft like this, we can put it into a shape, and then when it sets, it'll stay that shape.
We're gonna have to do a VE.
Oh yeah. Let's make a VE.
Alfred named it gelignite, the world's first moldable explosive. With gelignite, dynamite, and blasting cap in hand, Alfred had fulfilled his oath. He had made explosives safer for everyone. He opened factories across the world, in Scotland, France, the United
I think I've seen this used in Saving Private Ryan.
States and beyond. By the early 1870s, he was running more than 90 sites in 20
A
countries.
stick bomb or something.
But not everyone was happy. His father never recovered from Emil's death, and just weeks after the explosion in Stockholm, Emanuel suffered a stroke. He survived, but was never the same. Emanuel became obsessed with death, often rambling to Alfred about strange inventions, including a scheme to build a network of underground tubes that would carry corpses directly from people's homes to giant incinerators. His dad never had the success that Alfred's having, financially, and he's being lauded as this great inventor. His dad, I think, is just jealous, essentially, but he claims that Alfred had stolen the idea for dynamite from him. So he says to his dad, rather than regarding this idea as your own, far from it. You laughed at it. Your fatherly love seems to run aground on complacency or vanity. It should not seem strange that I, at the age of 30, will not allow myself to be treated as a schoolboy. It pains me, but when it comes to serious matters, I've adopted a rule of acting seriously. Despite the confident front he put up for his father, the truth was that his wealth hadn't made him any happier. He says, I'm 2 steps ahead of my competitors, but the accumulation of money and praise leaves me totally indifferent. My home is where I work, and I work everywhere. I am a nomadic atom, with no attachments, no roots, and no real joy in life. By 1876, he couldn't take it anymore. Overwhelmed by the loneliness, he placed an ad. Wealthy, highly educated elderly gentleman seeks lady of mature age, versed in languages, as secretary and supervisor of household. And into his life entered Bertha Kinsky. She was an idealistic woman, part of the budding peace movement. Together, they took long carriage rides where they discussed the role of science in society and whether it could serve a purpose greater than war. For a moment, Alfred was happy. Hopeful, he asked if her heart was free. But while Alfred was away on business, she left to be with another man in Austria. So Alfred was back to being alone. Alfred was
really?
He responded by throwing himself even deeper into his work. Alfred attempted to sell his explosives to the French military, but they weren't interested. Then a year later, when war broke out between France and Prussia, German troops hurled dynamite at the French positions. Now, Alfred received a message. The French wanted to place an order. One thing that I think is important to think about in this moment is that people have been stabbed, bruised, shot with gunpowder, and all sorts of stuff, but up till then, it would have been totally foreign to see that level of destruction on a human body.
It would have been unmatched in kind of human history.
As he starts thinking more about war and becoming involved with the French military, the German military, the Italian military, they come to him with a problem that's been plaguing them for hundreds of years since the invention of gunpowder, which is that on a battlefield with black powder, when you shoot, it obscures visibility so you don't really know how to shoot. Again, like you can't aim very well.
Yeah, one thing you're seeing with the black powder is that every time it explodes, there's just this huge plume of smoke that enemy fighters would be able to see your location.
So it's just this big problem where it's like a literal fog of war. Alfred starts contemplating that problem. What he thinks back to is gun cotton. It doesn't create smoke. Can I use gun cotton to replace powder? But the problem with using gun cotton or any high explosive mass in small arms is that it detonates all at once, releasing its energy in a split second. And the pressure inside the barrel spikes faster than the bullet can accelerate. So much of the energy is wasted as heat. Instead of propelling the projectile, it can even destroy the barrel. What Alfred wanted was a propellant that built pressure gradually, so the force rose smoothly as the bullet traveled down the barrel. So he began experimenting with a new nitroglycerin nitrocellulose mixture. By adding 10 to 20 times more nitrocellulose than in gelignite, he transformed it from a jelly into a tougher substance, one that could be rolled into pasta-thin sheets. In Italy, they even used pasta makers to do this. These sheets were then stamped into countless tiny little grains. When these grains were packed into a cartridge, they wouldn't fit tightly. Small gaps of air remained between them, but that was actually a good thing. Now, when one grain ignited, a shockwave couldn't just race through the entire charge at once. Instead, each grain had to ignite its neighbor, and the one beside it, and the next one in sequence. This slowed down the burn rate and allowed the pressure to build gradually. So they were able to replicate the effect of gunpowder. And because the fuel was a combination of nitroglycerin and nitrocellulose, both of which broke down into clear stable gases, it burned with little smoke. So Alfred had solved the problem that had plagued armies for centuries. And to this day, the propellant in much of the world's ammunition is still a combination of nitroglycerin and nitrocellulose, just like Alfred's invention. He called it ballistite, the world's first smokeless, high-energy propellant. Alfred quickly received an order for 300,000 kilograms of ballistite from the Italian army, so he opened a massive armaments factory in Italy and began to fall deeper into the world of warfare. He developed landmines, early gun silencers, and even experimented with one of the first rocket-powered missiles. It flew over 4 kilometers downrange and allegedly captured this image. The whole time he's in contact with Bertha, like the woman who kind of jilted him, and she's become pretty important in the peace movement at the time. She wrote this book called Lay Down Your Arms that became a kind of sensation and established these peace congresses across the world. To her, he insisted, my rockets are meant not only for war, but also for the rescue of
Yeah, he makes it weapons for war.
shipwrecked persons. He even took it a step further. Perhaps my factories will put an end to war sooner than your congresses. On the day that 2 army corps can mutually annihilate each other in a second, all civilized nations will surely recoil with horror and disband their troops. This is a concept that we see a lot of. When people are sure to kill each other with the modern weapons that I've given them, no war will be possible. It's also the same thing that we think about in Oppenheimer. I feel like we've heard it so many times that you just can't believe it ever.
No.
And then it's just marketing on the part of all these guys who are selling weapons. They don't want to come across as evil guys who are like, I'm gonna make something that'll help you kill more people than ever before. I mean, that's kind of the truth of it.
Especially in the dynamite case, it feels like a tremendous misjudgment of human nature. It's like, yeah, this is not going to be used to stop war. And we definitely don't see that in the decades that follow. Between the 1890s and the 1920s, over 7,000 bombings occurred in New York alone. Imagine waking up, opening the paper, and seeing another explosion every other day for decades. The most common perpetrators were known as the Dynamite Club. They were part of a deadly new political movement on the rise in America. They rejected industrialization and longed for a simpler world. Today, their name evokes chaos and destruction. But at the time, it was more literal. No ruler. And Arcos. This was anarchy. They were so crazy and so effective using dynamite that Theodore Roosevelt addressed Congress, and he said the largest threat facing the U.S. is the anarchist threat.
Were they intentionally just killing people?
Yeah. Their argument was that, you know, if one person dies at the hands of an anarchist, 100 people died in the industrial machine. Yeah.
These people sound crazy.
In fact, the entire modern practice of terrorism, using spectacular violence to advance a political agenda, often targeting civilians, that all began with the anarchists and their dynamite.
Dynamite unlocked a new scale of destruction previously unimaginable. With only a few sticks in a coat pocket, one person could walk into a crowded street and wreak havoc.
What began as an industrial tool had become a weapon of mass murder.
In 1927, in Bath, Michigan, a man spent months wiring the town's new elementary school with dynamite. He hid the charges in the basement and crawl spaces, concealed them under floors and behind walls, all while serving as the school board treasurer. Then,
Why?
on the morning of May 18th, just after classes began, he triggered the explosives.
As parents and rescuers rushed to the scene, he arrived in a truck packed with more dynamite and shrapnel and detonated.
In all, 38 children, 6 adults, and the attacker died. Another 58 were grievously injured.
The deadliest school massacre in American history was not a shooting. It was a dynamite attack. Of course, Alfred couldn't know all the ways in which his inventions would be abused, but he had seen the destruction in his own life, and he had heard the pleas to change his ways, so in 1888, when he read that paper, something in him broke.
Just a few years later, as his health began to fail, as he took pellets of nitroglycerin to ease the pain in his chest, he couldn't shake the thought. So he called his lawyer and wrote a new will.
With 94% of his personal fortune, 31.2 million Swedish kroner, or about $340 million today, he created a set of prizes for those who, during the preceding year, shall have conferred the greatest benefit on mankind, the Nobel Prize. There were 5 in total for chemistry, physics, medicine,
He actually created Nobel Prize.
literature, and finally, peace.
On December 10th, 1896, Alfred Nobel died in his villa in Italy, just as he had
An
always
actual good man.
feared. He died alone. At the time of his death, he held 355 patents and ran an empire of 90 factories that produced explosives and armaments across the world. And yet, in his final act, he gave his fortune away for an idea.
So, did it work? Did it redeem him in the eyes of everyone today?
Have you ever heard the name Alfred Nobel?
Oh yeah, he was the creator of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Nobel Prize, Nobel Prize.
Nobel Prizes?
Nobel Prize.
Nobel Prize.
Nobel Prize. Nobel Prize.
Nobel Prize. Nobel Prize.
Anything else?
I should know more.
The Nobel Prize.
Is that it?
Yes.
I'm saying like dynamite. Don't think about that at all.
Dynamite.
Yeah. He also invented dynamite.
Did not know that.
I didn't know about dynamite. I knew about the Peace Prize, but that's it.
I think the attempt has been to have him portrayed as somebody who tried to promote new understanding and advances in science. And so that's
That's his legacy.
yeah, it would seem.
I mean, if you're cynical, you say it's a PR move.
And are you inclined to be cynical?
I think it must be at least somewhat a PR move. To me, like, Nobel Prize has always been like the pinnacle of achievement. If anyone wins the Nobel Prize, like, yeah, you're done. Like, that's all you need to accomplish in life. I mean, in some ways, like, maybe he was in control of his legacy.
Yeah.
And he took control of his legacy.
He
He
did.
decided he wanted it to be a positive thing. There's a twisted irony to the story. When Alfred Nobel created dynamite, he was trying to make explosives safer to prevent the kind of accident that killed his brother. But by making nitroglycerin easier to handle, he also made it more accessible, and that made it more deadly. So why then did he create the Nobel Prizes? Was it out of the goodness of his heart, or a desire to redeem himself in the eyes of everyone who would come after? I mean, I think the idea that anyone
And the third part.
can be recognized for advancing science, literature, or peace is beautiful.
This award is not just a piece of metal that you would wear, or an award that you would keep in your room, but this is really an encouragement for me to go forward and to believe in myself, to know that there are people who are supporting me in this campaign.
So maybe it doesn't matter why he did it, only that he did.
Okay.